Okay, welcome. Welcome to the Civic Spark Poster Symposium Series, celebrating the accomplishments of the 2020-2021 Civic Spark Fellow Cohort. My name's Hannah Nielsen, and I am the Central California Regional Coordinator for Civic Spark, a national service program for the Local Government Commission. I will be co-facilitating today's session with Katie Webster for today's session, which is titled Coordination in the Urban Environment. I have a few logistical details before we get started. If you experience any technical difficulties during today's calls, please chat Katie Webster directly using the chat feature, and she can help you troubleshoot, as I will not be able to see incoming messages. Every fellow will have about 5 to 6 minutes to present their capstone posters and supplementary slides. Their posters summarize key accomplishments from their 11 months of AmeriCorps service to local governments across California. After each presentation, we'll open up to a couple of questions from the audience, which we may ask directly by either unmuting yourself or sending it in through the chat box for staff support to read off. Finally, I'd also really like to encourage the audience to participate throughout this virtual event. Please share your encouragement and congratulations in the chat box as each fellow presents. We encourage you all to use your webcams if that is available to you. So without further ado, let's get into the main show. We'll start the day hearing from Cy Baker, serving with Stop Waste, followed by Alexi Diosis, presenting on our work with the City of Santa Cruz Public Department Facilities Division. Okay, so I'm handing it over to Cy.
Hey all, how's it going? Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for being here. Excited to be going first and kind of getting to share the work I've been working with Stop Waste over the last year. So to start off, just to kind of speak to Stop Waste a little bit. So everybody knows Stop Waste is a public agency governed by the Alameda County Waste Management Authority, the Alameda County Source Reduction and Recycling Board, and the Energy Council that works with Alameda County's businesses, residents, and schools to waste less and use water, energy, and other resources efficiently. Today, I'm going to be focusing on a project that's come out of the original Adapting Built Environment project with Stop Waste. This project originally was working to kind of regeneratively and holistically look at how we can adapt our built environment for carbon reduction purposes and other kind of green initiatives. And this is sort of one thing that's come out of that. So, as a part of this effort to integrate more regenerative, more systems level thinking in programs and outreach, this project essentially began with conversations with the sustainability teams of Alameda County's jurisdictions about their work with respect to the built environment and shelter. So we talked to our 15 jurisdictions, kind of got a sense from where their work was headed with the built environment, and kind of created a two-pager and kind of started this all off. So the curriculum Rediscovering Place is centered around just that, adapting the built environment, and how can we do that? Thus the title, Using Sense of Place to Adapt the Built Environment. So this curriculum has people shift their perspective to their surroundings, understand the past of their neighborhoods and cities, broaden their understanding of their place within it, and essentially envision various futures for their built environment. It's a project that centers participant self-exploration, storytelling skills, and community building. And it's designed for high school and adult cohorts. Map making, storytelling, urban ecology, and equity all serve as the frameworks for Rediscovering Place. Our objectives are essentially to have participants identify their living and working environments through the lenses of urban ecology and equity, be able to describe the unique essence of their city or neighborhood, discover a sense of belonging in their community, create connections with people with different histories in the SF Bay area, engage meaningfully with their communities, and then be able to capture and share these discoveries and reflections through storytelling. If I could have us go to the next slide. So this curriculum has 5 modules. The first is neighborhood orientation. This is where we kind of jump right into it. We have participants explore their environments through different lenses, They first go out and make a mental map of their neighborhood. Then they go out and kind of sit in their neighborhood or walk through their neighborhood just to observe. They will participate in an environmental justice scavenger hunt. And then finally, on the fourth day, identify who their community leaders are and talk about what it means to be a community leader. In the second module, called Story of Home, we're really diving deeper into the meaning of home and the meaning of place. So participants are going to discuss what home means to them. They're going to investigate the history of where they live, whether that's their schools, neighborhoods, communities, or even the building that they live in. They're going to track where their energy and water come from. They're going to write a Where I'm From poem, and they're going to map the supply chain of an item in their home, just to kind of really broadly and holistically explore what home means. In the third module, Family Microhistories, we kind of dive deeper into our framework of storytelling, and we have participants tell the story of how they arrived in the Bay, mapping the multi-generational movements of their family, and then creating a personal narrative or a personal story that somehow connects to place in conversation with their cohort. In the fourth module, we are shifting gears, shifting into the future. It's called Envisioning the Future. And in this, participants are going to explore and dissect stories of utopian and dystopian futures and write their own visionary fiction as a way to envision the possible futures for their communities. It might feel like sci-fi because that's what it is. And we use this as a framework to discuss how we as a society constantly in community create and envision, and that's how we move forward. That will lead into the fifth module, which is just essentially an independent project that's centered upon community building, in which participants can work with some of the community leaders they identified earlier or on their own or within their cohort to do a project related to community building. So to wrap up, if we're really looking to build a future with thriving communities, if we're looking to build collective and equitable wealth, health, and opportunity, we're going to need regenerative and community-based solutions. And so the point of this project is to really think about if we tapped into the inherent importance of place and explored it with self-reflection and shared it through storytelling to empower and inspire our communities and ourselves. All right, that's it. Next slide. Does anyone have any questions?
Wonderful. Thank you, Sai. That was a really wonderful presentation, and congratulations on your work this last year and for your service as well. I'd like to open it up to questions. As we mentioned before, please just go ahead and unmute yourself or pop a question in the chat and I can go ahead and read it out.
Yeah, sorry, I have a question. First of all, this was just a really beautiful presentation, a really cool and creative idea. I had seen you send emails earlier in the year about like implementing this curriculum. So I was wondering if you had done that, like what were the results? How many participants did you get? And like what kind of feedback did you get?
Sure, yeah. So in terms of implementation, as far as we've gotten there is we've done a demo through the month of June. And so we've kind of gone through what there is of the draft, and this week actually we're collecting feedback, and so we're doing feedback sessions, which all are welcome to, whether or not you're able to attend or not, just because we're going to be talking about this kind of stuff. And so we're doing that now. We're integrating the feedback now. This is definitely not a project that like we're putting a period at the end of. It's really meant to be continually adapted and worked on. The schools team within Stop Waste is likely, is working on elements of it and hoping to integrate elements of the curriculum. So that's part of it. And then the second side of implementation that we're envisioning is just as an open source, PDF, Notion-based curriculum for folks to kind of have as a resource.
Great, that's wonderful. I think that gets into the next question that we had in the chat. Was Tiffany was wondering if it was shareable and adaptable for other cities and contexts, and it sounds like it will be. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the language is Bay specific, and yet there's not that much that would need to be changed in order for it to be more, really not limited to a particular space at all. The resources within the curriculum are very California based, and many of them are Bay Area based. But the actual activities themselves are really meant to be used in any context.
Perfect.
I will go ahead and actually share the Notion platform in the chat here.
Wonderful. I love seeing these connections popping up in the chat. Okay. So if we don't have any other questions, then congratulations again, Sai. That was really great to hear about your project. And thank you again for your work. Oh, we just popped this up. Okay. Next, we will hear from Lexi Diosis, who has served with she's going to be presenting on her work with the City of Santa Cruz Public Department Facilities Division. So I will turn it over to you, Lexi, to get started.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah, and good job, Sai. Super creative work. It's really cool to see. Thanks for the introduction. As Hannah said, my name is Lexi. I've spent my service year with the City of Santa Cruz, serving with the Climate Action Program, developing the 2030 Climate Action Plan, as well as with the Public Works Department Facility Division, building capacity for fleet electrification. What I'll be focusing my presentation on today. Sorry if there's background noise. The washing machine in my studio is running at full speed. So my core project activities centered on completing a fleet electrification study. The purpose of the study was to collect data and conduct analysis to assist in planning for complete fleet electrification. The city is undertaking fleet electrification to support our own greenhouse gas reduction goals, as well as to support California's greenhouse gas mitigation targets and legislation. The process for conducting the study began with researching other cities or government agencies' fleet electrification plans and policies, identifying useful tools to help bring the technical and analytical components, as well as reviewing different methods that other agencies had used. We decided to utilize an EV fleet planning tool that was developed by Optiny Consultants for the city of Fremont. This is a publicly available Excel-based tool that helped guide the city of Santa Cruz on starting the analytics for fleet electrification planning. Once we had identified a process, data collection began. This included collecting mileage, fueling, maintenance, and cost information about our fleet. The data required some refinement to prepare for the analysis, identifying and correcting for errors and inconsistencies in the data, as well as deciding what types of vehicles to include, and so forth. This portion of the work was pretty time intensive, and it required regular verification with the facilities manager, with one of our accountants who handles reporting on the fleet, as well as with my site supervisor who helped guide me on making assumptions on how to proceed when the needed information was not always available. So to the fun part, the outcomes of the study identified 317 vehicles that are potential candidates for electrification, accompanied by a potential timeline for replacement of those vehicles. This is the graph shown in the bottom left corner. The columns in blue are the total number of vehicles anticipated to be replaced, and the columns in orange are the total number of vehicles set to be replaced that are candidates for electrification. So it's not 140 on top of 154, it's 140 out of that 154 to be replaced. I say potential because these results have not yet been circulated in our department or ground truth with staff, and they may take some refinement. The vehicle replacement timeline is created by calculating an expected replacement year for each vehicle and then plotting that by the calculated year. Vehicle replacements are calculated through the year 2050 from present, as some vehicles can be utilized in fleets for quite some time because they often don't drive more than 2,000 to 3,000 miles a year, even though most cities will have a 5, 8, or 10-year threshold on when vehicles are replaced. Looking at our data, that threshold is not always strictly followed. This is not shown, but another component of the analysis was calculating total costs of ownership and comparing the total cost of replacing each existing vehicle in the fleet with a new internal combustion engine vehicle versus a new electric vehicle over a 10-year time period. The total cost of ownership is a summation of capital costs. So that includes purchase price, auxiliary equipment, and equipment upgrades, and operating costs, which includes fuel or charging costs, operations, and maintenance costs. For some of our departments, the total cost of ownership comparisons indicated cost savings over that 10-year time period if total electrification were to happen, and for others, it indicated added costs. But again, just highlighting these results are contingent on refinement and review with our departments. Another helpful project outcome is a better understanding of the process of strategically electrifying a fleet. The process map in the top right corner demonstrates how all of the components of fleet planning are foundational to one another. If we can go to the next slide, this is shown a little bit more in depth. If you look at the planning phase process map, the first step is to conduct a vehicle suitability analysis. The results of this will identify the estimated number of EVs that a fleet will deploy each year. This provides baseline information for assessing your energy and infrastructure, as well as identifies the required capital needed on a yearly basis to procure said EVs. This is the stage that the city of Santa Cruz is currently at, represented by the gold star. Stakeholder engagement early on in the planning phase is also crucial to ground the analysis and refine, identifying what is achievable for the city, not just what is possible given the analysis parameters. Internal engagement will also help gauge any barriers to implementation, identify any workforce development or employee training that might be needed. And external engagement, such as working with the utilities and CCAs, can also open up funding or incentive opportunities. Once replacement timelines have been identified, it'll be easier to conduct load forecasting analyses, which identifies the amount of electricity needed to charge the anticipated number of EVs to be deployed. At this stage, conducting analysis to identify optimal charging scenarios is key to not over deploying infrastructure or over upgrading energy system capacities. Optimal charging scenarios basically match times that vehicles are parked to the most cost-effective electricity rates and avoids incurring peak demand charges. This also identifies how many chargers are needed per vehicle. It's not always true that a one-to-one relationship exists between a vehicle and a charger. Depending on the times of use of a vehicle, the range they drive on a weekly or daily basis, it might be possible that 2 to 3 vehicles can utilize one charger. So planning and implementation overlaps a bit with identifying and securing funds. Implementation really begins with upgrading infrastructure or adding capacity to systems. The last step in a process is to procure EVs and drive them. And lastly, follow-up engagement should be built in to adjust and refine and address any challenges should they arise. So that is everything I have to share, and I guess I will take questions now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lexi. Great work. Congratulations. And thank you so much for your service this last year. Again, you can unmute yourself if you have any questions to ask Lexi directly or pop them in the chat.
Hey, Lexi, could you explain a little bit more about the chart on your first slide and kind of where these other vehicles are coming from, like 10 years down the road?
Sure. So the vehicle replacement timeline is created by calculating the expected replacement year for each vehicle. The replacement year is a function of the vehicle age, mileage, and the cost to maintain, or the replacement factors. Each factor is projected into the future on a vehicle by vehicle basis. So basically the reason why there are, the results are indicating that quite a large number of vehicles, about 140 could be, with unlimited budget and staff capacity, could be replaced and electrified in 2022 is because we have a lot of older vehicles that are currently at a high utilization rate. Or sorry, they have had a lot of their, they have had a lot of miles driven, they've had a lot of maintenance poured into them. And so some of the variables that we calculated indicate that they could be replaced immediately or are good candidates to do so. And that they're also, in a duty classification where there is currently an electric alternative. And that varies year to year, just depending on the makeup of vehicles that have that utilization rate that are or a certain age or have had a certain amount of maintenance poured into them, and that it gets a little bit thinner as the years go, because we do have a lot of vehicles in our fleet currently that are a bit older and are prime for replacement.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, definitely make sure to read the chat. You have lots of kudos coming in, Lexi. Good job again. And congratulations on finishing out this project. Okay, next up, we will hear from Mahogany Smith Christopher, serving in the Air Quality and Climate at the Gateway Cities Council of Governments.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me and taking time of your day to listen to my presentation. As mentioned, I was placed at the Gateway City Council of Governments in the Air Quality and Climate Program area, where I focused on 2 areas, urban greening, which I was a part of an urban tree canopy project and also energy projects where I partnered with the Southern California Regional Energy Network, where we also, sorry about that, where we also developed the energy working group. So first I'll be focusing on the urban tree canopy project. So the Gateway City Council of Governments, in collaboration with Loyola Marymount University Center of Urban Resilience and Tree People, received a $200,000 grant from the California Resilience Challenge through the Bay Area Council to develop local level tree canopy assessments, along with a community engagement and prioritization component in 4 cities. And these are Linwood, Paramount, Vernon, and Montebello. So in order to, go through this process, we asked 3 questions of cities. So we asked, how much tree canopy do we have? How much room do we have to plant trees? And where should we plant trees? So how did we do this? We did this through a community-based tree canopy prioritization process. So working with cities to leverage a parcel level assessment of existing and possible tree canopy based on high resolution imagery and LiDAR data. This consisted of meeting with each city to hear about priorities and also developing a survey, conducting a data-driven collaborative prioritization process in each city. So this was hosting tree summits. In Linwood, we hosted a total of 2 tree summits. And in Paramount, where we're currently still conducting our planning efforts, we've conducted 1 tree summit, and we've also disseminated the survey in both cities as well. And then finally concluding with producing analysis, reports, and maps and tools to empower the community. So sharing analysis, reports, and maps to guide in tree planning. So what I want to point out is in the lower left-hand corner, you see 2 graphs, and this is taken from the LiDAR data that LMU conducted. So we have existing tree canopy and then possible tree canopy. So you see in the existing tree canopy, I know you can't really see the percentages that well, but we have an average for about 16%, but possible is 41%. So you see where the need of tree canopy, specifically in Linwood, there is. So this project is definitely going to go in and plant trees in Linwood to kind of allow them to reach this possible tree canopy. However, I do want to make note that though the possible tree canopy percentage is fairly high, the LiDAR data only kind of reads what's geographically feasible for tree canopy. It doesn't read things like, the middle of softball fields or football fields. So the possible tree canopy percentage may vary, once we're actually out there going to plant trees. So some final deliverables that I was able to contribute to the COG was the Urban Tree Canopy webpage, which you see a small snapshot of to the right. The Linwood Tree Summit, a lot of planning, project management, collaboration with our project partners for this, the Linwood Tree Survey, co-authoring the Linwood Final Report, the Linwood Fruit Tree Distribution along with Tree People, and now our efforts in Paramount, the Paramount Tree Summit and the Paramount Tree Survey. So next slide, please. Through the COGS partnership with SoCalRen, we were able to provide cities information and access to SoCalRen public agency programs. And to date, there are currently 17 enrolled agencies, including Bellflower Unified School District. And through this partnership with SoCalRen, we also developed an energy working group. And the Energy Working Group is an active and informative networking group for all member cities interested in becoming more sustainable in energy efficiency throughout their operations. And this meets quarterly with representatives of the programs listed on the Energy Action Tracking Tool sheet. I don't know if you can see that, but that is the Beacon program, SoCal Gas, and SoCalRen. I also want to point out my contribution to the COG, which is the Energy Action Tracking Tool. As I mentioned, through the Energy Working Group and our efforts with SoCalRen, we're really trying to enhance these gateways gateway cities their energy efficiency projects. So I've developed an energy action tracking tool in order to keep track of all of the city's efforts towards sustainability and energy efficiency. So that is indicated to the left of the poster. I don't know if there's a way to, I know it's a little bit pixelated, sorry. And then finally, to incentivize our gateway cities to engage in and improve energy efficiency and sustainability, we've created a motivational model, and that's the Gateway Cities Energy Action Awards. And this will take the place of our December Energy Working Group. So from their efforts towards, all their energy efficiency projects and their sustainability efforts indicated on the energy action tracking tool, will be implementing awards. So that concludes my work at the COG. Thank you all for listening, and I've provided my Civic Spark email along with my regular Gmail because we'll soon lose access to the Civic Spark Gmail, so feel free to reach out, and now I'll open it up for questions.
Wonderful. Great work, Mahogany. That's really great to learn about. Congratulations again also for your year of service. If there's any questions, please pop them in the chat or unmute yourself directly. It looks like we have a question in the chat. Kaylee asked, can you share a bit more about what the tree summits look like?
Yeah, so that was actually a question I asked before, being a part of this process as well. But this was a virtual tree summit. There was a lot of marketing and outreach to cities prior to the tree summit in order to, get enough participants. But the tree summit consisted of a virtual, it was virtual. We had like icebreakers. We allowed people to plant trees, and we provided a virtual tree map and allowed people to plant trees of where they will want to see trees within their city. There was presentations from both the Loyola Marymount Center of Urban Resiliency partners and also tree people. So that's a little bit of how it looked. And then towards the end of the tree summit, the survey was disseminated. So in addition to, if you didn't have time during the tree summit in order to do the tree survey, it was sent out as well. So that's kind of the structure for the tree summit. We've conducted 2 so far, one in Linwood and one in Paramount, and we've had a really good turnout. So yeah.
Wonderful. And were these tree summits done virtually, or was it also a hybrid model? I may have missed that.
No, they were both done virtually.
Virtually.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, yeah, Nikki.
Hey, Mahogany, great presentation. I'm just curious, in your work kind of assessing the best places to put these trees, did you run up against any community concerns about wildfire resilience and urban greening, or need to coordinate with fire safe councils or anything like that? I'm not very familiar with the region, so I'm not sure if wildfire risk is a top priority there, but just curious.
Yeah, so in the Gateway region, there isn't much of a priority for wildfires, but I can name some of the concerns that cities have listed, because in that initial, in the planning process, we do meet with cities for them to give us any concerns for tree plantings in the cities. Wildfires have not been one, but there has been, like I said, mention around just where to plant trees, as far as not planting them or giving out misinformation about planting them in places where it's not really feasible for the community. So as I mentioned, softball fields or different places where you have social events, kind of trying to plan around that, and different parkways and trails and things like that. So we really tried to take the city's concerns, and that has not been one of them, but we can definitely look into that, and I'll keep my ear out for if I do hear that in Vernon or Montebello, which are our next 2 cities, but so far no talk about wildfires.
Great question. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you again, Mahogany. This was a really great presentation. Now we will turn it over to Jenny Quesada, who is serving with the Economic Development Collaborative Film Division. Jenny, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Hannah, and hi to everyone. So my name is Jenny, and I'll be talking about one of my 3 projects that I worked on, being the GIS map that I built through My Maps, a Google platform, which focuses on building resilience within film permitting in Ventura County. So resiliency is measured by the normalization and rebuilding of capacity. That is, if there's an event which disrupts an environment, such as a hurricane, a community may be displaced and hurt economically, and typically there will be efforts to get them back to how life was before. And as mentioned, I focus on COVID recovery by applying a resilience that leaves tools for a community to come out stronger through the availability of resources. So when California shut down after declaring the COVID-19 crisis as a pandemic, as many parts of the economy, the Ventura County film permitting was affected. The shutdown of the film industry meant that there was an interruption of permitting, and its economic impact went from making $80 million a year to 0 in March 2020. And after reaching 0, there was some miscommunication that was seen during the transitions to film permitting with new COVID regulations, which halted the process and called for cooperation among all of the stakeholders in order to get back to normal. And the stakeholders of film permitting include the community members of Ventura County, incoming productions, and permitting figures, also known as the jurisdictions. So the stakeholders play an important role in the permitting process and actually also profit from the benefits. So I built a GIS map resource that's meant to aid them specifically, and which holds information necessary for them to understand the layering of film permitting with the goals of creating awareness of the benefits for community members, simplifying the process for productions, and allowing jurisdictions to understand the need for them to prioritize film permits in order to increase the impact. In Ventura County, there are around 35 permitting figures, including cities and special districts, and the permitting leads to 100% economic recovery and typically generates more business and jobs into the county. So the residents benefit from this kind of impact. And just to better explain the process and highlight the benefits, I've included a case study which breaks down the complexity of the permitting process, in which the GIS map can serve as a tool to make the process a bit easier. So if you can click the next slide, please. So this case gives you an idea of how the economic impact of filming is and how the stakeholders are involved to make sure that the benefits are successful. So in general, a film production needs to coordinate with about 2 permitting jurisdictions in order to begin production, and each of the process and the fee differs. In this example, Production X has presented this image in order to determine which permits they need to proceed with filming. And their production would include a train wreck, where they would take 23 days in the county in order to build, prepare, film, and take down their shot. Around 40% of the crew would be Ventura County residents. And in this image, it shows to the right that the production would actually have to coordinate with up to 10 permitting figures in order to begin production in Ventura County. And for this reason, the permitting process becomes highly complicated for incoming productions, since they have to engage with federal to local jurisdictions, all which have a different process of permitting. So the GIS map would then guide them to answer 5 questions. So we've determined it to be the who, what, where, when, and how of their shot. And this will in general guide them to which jurisdictions they need to get in touch with. And for this image, just to emphasize economical benefits, it would produce around $260,000 a day, but it would increase to $320,000 for every full-time equivalent, considering that 40% of the crew would live in Ventura County. And so that totals to about $3.2 million for a 23-day production. If you can click to the next slide, please. So just in order to facilitate this complex process of permitting, the GIS map, which is like a picture is here, aims to make known of these economical benefits. So the $3 million for 23 days, where 40% of the crew would be Ventura County residents, so therefore the stakeholders as well. And essentially the GIS map is used to break down through images an overly elaborate process, because due to its complexity, communication and awareness becomes highly necessary. So just to conclude, as mentioned, I built this on My Maps, a Google platform, and it just shows the patterns that deconstruct the complex taxonomy of film permitting, and it will be connected to the Ventura County Film Commission's website in order to be more accessible to the community, where I hope it will facilitate the information necessary for stakeholders in order to boost the efficacy of film permitting. So that's it. And thank you so much for your time.
Wonderful. Congratulations, Jenny. That was a wonderful presentation. And thank you for your service this last year. Once again, I'd like to open it up to questions. If anybody wants to pop them in the chat, or please just go ahead and unmute yourself now.
Jenny, thank you. Great presentation and very interesting topic. I'm just curious if you have like a breakdown of that $230,000 a day for the filming, like and that's money for the city or the county? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, I don't have a specific breakdown, but I believe it's the money that, like the fees for permitting, maybe what they paid the residents, things like that, like the crew members. But I'm not sure the specific details, but I do know that it's typically the permitting fees.
Great. And it looks like Nikki Caravelli would like to see a link to the tool if that's possible.
Yeah, I'll add it right now to the chat.
Great, thanks.
Jenny, can you talk a bit about, well, actually, I'll ask this question in the chat. Kaylee asks, what's been the most surprising thing about your project that you learned this last year?
Well, the whole theme of it, right? Like the economic impact that filming brings in, especially because I am a resident as well of Ventura County. I've been here my whole life. So now as I like drive around, I see how much filming there is being done, and just knowing like that there's a lot of positive benefits. I think that's been the most like surprising thing.
Great.
Oh, Hannah, you still there?
Oh, yes, I am.
Okay, well, are there any other questions for Jenny? No? Okay, so I'll be taking over for the second half of our session today. And so next up, I'm excited to introduce Nate Redenbow, who served with the City of Piedmont.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for attending today. And I want to give a huge shout out to everyone who presented before me, because those were super interesting. Especially the film one, I had no idea that was going on, and I look forward to looking through that website more. My name is Nate, and I'm the Civic Spark Fellow for the City of Piedmont in their Planning and Building Department. My work this year has focused on building electrification, specifically residential homes. So first I'm going to go over some background for the City of Piedmont, because I, for one, had not heard of it before this service year. Piedmont's a super small city in the East Bay area. It has about 10,000 residents, and it's almost entirely residential. There are very few commercial structures, and Piedmont is surrounded entirely by the city of Oakland, and the city boundaries, it's just 1.7 square miles, so it's super small. It's like the Rhode Island of cities. Despite its small size, Piedmont emits more greenhouse gases per capita than any other city in the Bay Area. So there's clearly a lot of potential work to be done here. This is partly due to the older and larger homes that fill Piedmont, but it is also due to high incomes and large amounts of consumption. Piedmont has the highest median family income in the entire state, and I think that definitely contributes to emissions. Our greenhouse gas inventory is completed annually and uses an in-boundary approach, which means that consumption that occurs outside of the city boundaries is not captured in our inventory. So that means that our main approach to cutting greenhouse gases is focused on cutting natural gas emissions from inside the city instead of consumption of goods. Approximately 40% of our in-boundary emissions stem from natural gas use. And I included a graph on this poster because I think this is a really important figure. This is from this year's greenhouse gas inventory. And you can see that residential natural gas emissions are the primary source of emissions in the entire energy sector. And that's the largest, that's the spike on the left hand side of the graph. In 2018, the city of Piedmont joined the local CCA and signed up all residential accounts for the 100% renewable electricity plan, which was super exciting. And this decision, you can see the effect it had in the second set of bars on the graph. In 2018, we were still using the mixed electricity, and in 2019, the entirely renewable electricity is reflected. That's the tiny green bar. So in that same period, though, natural gas emissions continued to rise, and household natural gas is used primarily in appliances like water heaters, furnaces, and stovetops. And these are things that everyone has, and it can be a little difficult to find messaging that works because who wants to get rid of their water heater? And many people are not aware of electric alternatives. So with all of this in mind, there's been a 2-year process to get building energy reach codes approved by City Council in Piedmont. And if passed, these codes would mandate stricter requirements for homeowners who are building or renovating their home. And many of these requirements focused on electrification because, as I mentioned, every appliance that we switch from natural gas to electricity directly impacts our emissions because our electricity doesn't produce carbon emissions. So, and they're called energy reach codes because they reach above and beyond the existing state requirements. They're more strict. So I'm happy to say that the reach codes passed earlier this year and they're approved by the CEC just about 2 months ago. And so this last month, we've really been working on messaging to residents and letting them know how their projects will be affected. One aspect of the reach codes that other cities could emulate are the project cost qualifiers. And you can see in the bottom left-hand box some of the effects that the reach codes will have on homeowners. But one really interesting thing is it only affects projects that are worth over $25,000. There were a lot of concerns about cost, and that was our way of alleviating those concerns among residents. So in addition to research for the reach codes, I've been helping staff members with other initiatives, which you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. Although these programs all impact different populations throughout Piedmont, we try to keep the messaging super consistent about the benefits of electrification and why you should stop using natural gas. We just keep hammering it home and hopefully people take notice. One project we've worked on is the Piedmont Climate Challenge, which is an internet challenge focused on individual action and how those actions translate to a change at a larger level. This has been an interesting challenge in the face of COVID, but I'm confident that outreach will continue next year as things get better. And honestly, it's been kind of a boon because it's entirely online. And I don't know about you, but I've spent some time online this year. We've also been working towards public electric vehicle chargers. And as I mentioned, Piedmont's not a very large city, and converting public spots meant for traditional gas vehicles to electric car parking could help drive changes in transportation habits. We're actually bringing this item back to council on Monday, so send me good luck vibes. And in the next slide, I mentioned a few ways we've tried to get the word out about the reach codes during COVID. I know a lot of agencies have been struggling with communicating during COVID, and we've tried a number of different approaches. These included starting our inaugural climate newsletter, updating the city's website, hosting virtual events. We've also worked with a local environmental nonprofit to get the word out about electrification to the larger community. And we found that connecting electrification to things that residents care about really can help cement the message in their mind and hopefully make a difference. That about sums up my presentation. If you have any questions or want to learn more about this topic, I know this is like a very bird's eye view of the topic. Please feel free to shoot me an email. I love talking about this. And it's really interesting. I was not aware of the effect electrification can have, but it's truly a really useful tool in our toolkit, especially in California. So thank you for listening.
Great. Thank you so much for your presentation, Nate, and congratulations on completing this project and finishing your service here. So it looks like we do have a question from Nikki, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hey, Nate, thanks for your great presentation. I was hoping you could elaborate a little more on some of the messages that you use to try to reach community members and stakeholders. I was curious, did you just focus on the greenhouse gas emissions? Did you focus on energy savings or cost savings, energy resilience, and like grid resilience? Yeah, just curious.
Yeah, that's a super good question. When I first came in, I really wanted to focus on greenhouse gas emissions, but it quickly came to light that people really care, in addition to that, but about cost and about how much this project will ultimately cost. So we really looked at rebates, like local organizations like Bayren offer some really good rebates for electric appliances. And so pushing the lower cost that electric appliances can lead to down the line. It might have a high initial investment, but eventually it'll be less than natural gas. And health benefits as well. Burning natural gas in your home can lead to some pretty ugly health outcomes, and just kind of the whole toolkit, not just greenhouse gas emissions, but everything else. But specifically money was super helpful.
Great, thank you, Nikki, for that question. And okay, any other questions from the audience? No? Okay. Well, thank you again, Nate, and best of luck with what's next after Civic Spark.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we'll have Myra Garcia, who served with the City of San Diego.
Hi, thank you, Katie. As Katie mentioned, my name is Myra Garcia, and I had the opportunity to serve with the City of San Diego Sustainability Department as they began to implement the Smart City Open Urban Platform, also known as SCOOP. So throughout the year, I was able to assist in the research, outreach, and implementation phase of this project. So as a fellow, I was able to spearhead the SCOOP outreach process by assisting in the coordination of engagement meetings, educating internal stakeholders throughout the City of San Diego, and assisting in the development of the Municipal Energy Implementation Plan. So to provide a bit of background, in 2017, the City of San Diego was awarded a grant from the California Energy Commission to begin the SCOOP pilot project. So the goal of this project was to reduce municipal energy building consumption and aim to reach zero emissions by 2030. So after conducting research, the city found that building greenhouse gas emissions were second only to transportation when accounting for electricity use, water use, and wastewater treatment. So the city was really trying to mobilize and try to reduce their carbon emissions and try to reach their 2030 and 2050 climate goals. So San Diego recognized the need to pivot to zero emission buildings. So to assist in reaching the city and state climate action goals, the SCOOP network would allow the city to track, reduce, and benchmark energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. So the SCOOP project was divided into two different phases. The first phase began throughout my fellowship, and it was the installation of building energy management systems and controls that tracked real-time energy performance at city facilities and provided feedback on building energy usage. So this included the installation of direct digital control thermostats across city buildings. And these were located in communities of concern, which were census tracts identified by the City of San Diego's Climate Equity Index as areas with very low to low access to opportunity and a high degree of potential impact from climate change. So this would not only help the city reach their climate action goals and reach the municipal energy emission standards, but also assist in promoting equity across city projects. So during this phase of the project, I was able to coordinate meetings with various city departments to take part in the internal engagement process. However, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we were unable to host any in-person engagement sessions. So that led us to transition to Microsoft Teams to conduct our outreach. So the second phase of the project will actually be starting this July and will include the installation of the energy dashboards across all of the facility lobbies. So these dashboards will monitor energy consumption in real time and will allow the city to analyze and optimize energy performance. So throughout the implementation of this project, the city did face various challenges that complicated the execution of the project. One major issue that delayed the project was the lack of upper management buy-in and the lack of project prioritization. So the grant was received in 2017, but since 2017, there's just been various directors in the department that had different priorities for the city. So that did delay the initial project timeline. So this not only delayed the contracting and the construction of the project, but it also delayed the outreach process significantly. So some recommendations moving forward would be to begin the outreach process as early as possible. I feel like this is said in a lot of projects, but it's very important to promote project transparency and set project expectations. Another recommendation is to just ensure that upper management buy-in and make sure that this project becomes a priority, especially when there's a huge amount of grant money involved. Lastly, to have members on the team dedicated to grant management that can work to keep timelines and project goals consistent. So some of the next steps for this project include the installation of those energy dashboards across the facility lobbies. So these will be installed in various languages, including but not limited to Spanish, Tagalog, Vietnamese, and Chinese, to also use that equity component. Train staff to maintain and monitor scoop facilities to avoid any deferred maintenance, and implement a zero emission energy policy to put the city on the path to zero emissions. Next slide, please. So throughout the year, I was able to work on various tasks for this project. So some of the project accomplishments were creating some materials. This involved identifying key stakeholders through stakeholder mapping. So I was able to identify key asset owners, identify objectives and messaging that would be essential for the outreach process. So I was able to do this through InDesign and Canva, creating infographics, social media content, and presentation. I also assisted in the development of GIS maps that would help city staff visualize and understand the need to reduce municipal energy consumption. So these were just some of the materials that I've created and that will be helpful in the second phase of the project. And that concludes my presentation. If anyone has any questions, I would be happy to answer. Thank you.
Wonderful. Great, Myra, that was really interesting. I'm curious, so the dashboard is going to be displayed on some kind of smart screen where folks can interact with it?
Yes, so in the past, the city has installed smart screens. In the past, they've been touch screen, but because of COVID, they are no longer pushing that. So they'll just display energy data when these are installed.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, congratulations for completing your service and having this great project to hand off. And thank you again for your presentation, Myra. Okay. Any questions for Myra? Looks like we have a lot of congrats in the chat box for you.
I have a question, Myra. I was wondering what some of the biggest lessons you learned about doing virtual community engagement during COVID.
So I did realize that more people were able to come out to virtual volunteer engagement sessions. However, it was much more difficult to try to get people to participate sometimes. So I think in the future, when they do transition to in-person events, it'll be much better. So hopefully more people can, be actively involved in engagement, but this first phase was only internal, so it was only with city staff. So the second phase will involve more community members.
Okay, well, thank you again, Myra. And we'll close out our session today with Emily Ng, who served with the City of Los Angeles.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for sticking around for this last presentation. So again, my name is Emily, and this year I served at the City of Los Angeles Mayor's Office of Sustainability. and one of my projects was focused on environmental justice and equity in LA's Green New Deal. So I guess first, for a little bit of an overview and some background, LA's Green New Deal, or LA's GND, is the city's sustainability plan, which is focused on environment, economy, as well as equity. The plan was released in April of 2019, and it covers 13 different chapters, with the first chapter being environmental justice. One of my projects I worked on this year was creating an audit of the environmental justice chapter in the GND. So this audit included an equity assessment, which I'll speak a little bit more about afterwards. And the purpose of this audit was to understand progress of these initiatives and the plan after its first year of implementation, as well as identify potential gaps and priorities for the next year. So for a high-level summary of the process at the top of my poster here, the first step I took in beginning this process was researching different equity assessment frameworks, specifically to local governments and aimed at sustainability. While researching different frameworks, I came across the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, or GARE, as well as the City of Seattle's Racial Equity Toolkit. And these two toolkits seem to very much align with the work we were doing here at the city. So I took those two toolkits and modified the questions a little bit more to our own situation and plan. Then I received feedback and worked with our sustainability office team to tailor them a little bit more to what the office had in mind. I then communicated with city departments such as Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, as well as LA Sanitation and various other departments to better understand how the implementation progress of these initiatives has been going. Next, we formed sub-teams within the sustainability team and completed the equity assessment. So in this equity assessment featured questions such as having a discussion on who benefits and who is burdened by a specific initiative, what are the unintended consequences of this initiative, and understanding who is opposing this initiative and what are the reasons why. So asking questions like that and having a very deep and rich conversation. And at the end of this assessment, we would then collectively come to agreement and discuss the rating that we wanted to give the specific initiative. So the rating was based on a scale from 1 to 5, which reflected both the environmental justice and equity impact the initiative had, as well as the feasibility. Now, this feasibility factor is a characteristic because although this plan works within city boundaries, it also features sustainability goals and plans that have other stakeholders involved. For example, if a specific initiative outlines that LA County is the enforcer of the initiative, it would be more difficult for our office to really push and prioritize that initiative. That is not to say that our office obviously will not keep pushing, but just in terms of what we can do on our end was something we wanted to identify. Lastly, in the process, I presented the results to the team, and we facilitated a discussion on next steps and things like that. I guess for some metrics here, you can see them below, but overall, this process audited 84 environmental justice initiatives, all in the GND, and about 28 hours of very rich qualitative discussions on equity and environmental justice. And in the end, after the results were presented, and we had a team discussion on the next steps. This document really served as a guiding document to support not only this next year of implementation, but also guiding staff time and energy towards the projects that really impact environmental justice and equity in the city. And then really quick, next slide, please. All right, so in terms of some challenges and lessons learned, especially for replicating this project in the future, one major challenge was, again, taking these very rich conversations and finding a way to present the results in a summarized way. So one of the ways I went about this was not only coming up with an EJ rating scale, but also taking note of all of these rich conversations to refer back to in the future on a qualitative scale. So having both that quantitative and qualitative note-taking so we could refer back to that in the future was very helpful. Another sort of piece of advice that was very helpful was starting off on the same foot. So before beginning this entire process, we sat down as a team and really defined environmental justice and equity before starting the process. And that, again, cleared a lot of that complex sort of different levels of understanding in the room. So yeah, that is all I have on my project. I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Thank you, Emily. Great presentation. And congratulations on finishing your service here. And thank you so much for all the work you put into this and for the city of LA. Yeah, so I just had a question so it sounds like this was kind of an internal process, but was there any input from members of the community during this assessment and evaluation?
Yeah, so in this specific process, it was more of an internal basis, but when first coming up with the goals and initiatives that made up the Green New Deal, there was a lot of stakeholder meetings between CBOs, businesses, and the county as well. So this specific assessment was more internal, but there has been more external community engagement in the past.
Okay, thank you. Awesome. Is there any questions for Emily from the audience? Awesome. Well, congratulations, Emily. And again, great presentation. And I just want to say thank you to all the fellows that presented today. You guys have done incredible work. And I think that shows in just the short glimpse we got of each of your projects. Thanks again, everyone. And I want to share with other folks in the audience that we'll have more poster sessions continuing this week and next week. And we want to invite you to our graduation ceremony happening on July 29th at 1 p.m. So yeah, folks from our network and partners are welcome to attend, as well as friends and family. So you can get that with this QR code, or you can find out more by going to our website, civicspark.lgc.org. Alrighty. Well, with that, we'll sign off for today, and thank you again, everyone.
Thank you. Congratulations, everyone.
Well done, everyone.